Games with Jeff. Howdy folks. Now that the pre-patch is upon us, I wanted to take some time to update my Discipline Priest guide. Now these video guides on YouTube are almost always super long and slow and they're really boring, but this one is going to buck that trend. I'm only going to go over the most important stuff that I think you need to know to get started raiding with Discipline Priest. Now in my subjective opinion, Discipline Priest is the most difficult healer to get started with, but that doesn't mean you'll never be able to do it. I'd say it took me about 3 weeks or so of random pugging on my Disc Priest back in Tomb of Sargeras before I was doing decent levels of healing. It definitely takes practice, but hopefully this video will help you get up to speed sooner rather than later. While playing Discipline Priest, it's absolutely essential that you can easily cast on your allies to place Atonement, but also on the enemy to do damage, thus healing the allies who have Atonement. There are a few ways to do that. Some folks use add-ons, but I prefer to just use Mouseover Macros like the one you see here on the screen. Make one for anything that you cast on an ally. Powered Shield, Shadow Mend, Leap of Faith, anything like that. Keep the enemy targeted to use your offensive spells, and simply mouse over your allies on the raid frames in order to cast healing spells. You can also use focus macros, but sometimes bosses despawn or change in the middle of the fight, and I don't like having to refocus again. Here are what I think are the best default beginner raid talents if you're just starting out as Disc. I'm not going to go super in depth because this is the part of the video where other guides take a billion years. Castigation isn't as strong as it used to be, and Twist of Fate is only good on higher progression where people are constantly falling below 35% health. Schism is a good choice if you don't mind adding it into your rotation, and it helps to offset the loss of Light's Wrath a bit. Shield Discipline is a great choice because it gives you more mana, and thus more leeway when starting out. On farm fights, once mana is no longer an issue, Mindbender will be the best choice. Contrition can be a good talent, but I recommend not using it starting out, as it complicates the rotation. With the nerf to Purge the Wicked, I suggest using Halo on spread out fights, like Garathi, and Divine Star on stacked fights, like Varimathras. Purge is still useful if you don't want the extra button, but it's not as good as it was in Legion. Evangelism is the clear winner for raids, and Lenience the clear choice for dungeons, but Luminous Barrier is fun to play around with on easier content. Just like in Legion, secondary stats are very well balanced for Discipline. Whereas Holy Paladins were always looking for crit, we can simply equip whatever has a higher item level. That said, haste often makes the rotation feel smoother, and especially so when starting out. So I recommend having a decent amount of it, at least near the other stats. It helps to get Atonement out faster, and decreases the ramp up time for our healing. The best legendaries are still Velens and Pridaz. The latter has a great budget of stats, while Velen synergizes very well with our burst healing capability. Soul of the High Priest is a decent alternative if you don't have both of these legendaries yet. The tier 22 set from Tomb of Sargeras remains quite strong. If you have it starting out, I'd recommend using it. Once you can equip the tier 21 4 set though, that is definitely the better choice. For new players just starting out, I recommend not paying much attention to your mana bar. In my experience, most healers often cast too little when they are starting out, not too much. Once you get more comfortable with your rotation, you can start learning when not to cast and save extra mana. Good mana return trinkets like Carafe of Searing Light from Varimathras are very helpful for Disc. The Pantheon trinket, Eonar's Compassion, is also very good for the spec. So go ahead and take a look at the fight that's playing right now. What I'm doing is using Power Word Shield and Power Word Radiance to apply atonements a few seconds before large spikes of incoming damage. I try to time it so that the Radiance lands just after the damage occurs, and then I immediately follow up with a Penance and a Smite. If you take the Schism talent, then Schism first, followed by Penance and then Smite. The trick is to make sure that you have Atonement out on most people right when damage occurs. If you don't have Penance up and need to heal, you won't do any healing. If you try to get Atonement out after damage has occurred, then your allies will either die in the time it takes, or other healers will steal all your potential healing. Make sure that you keep Shadow Word Pain up on the boss at all times. Not only does it do damage, but it also has a chance to randomly buff your Penance damage. Keep it up as much as possible, preferably before you apply Atonements and do burst healing. Now, it definitely sucks to have lost Light's Wrath, but Disc can still do some respectable burst healing with Schism, Halo, and then Penance. When using Schism, remember that it buffs the damage that you do, so make sure that you cast Penance after it, and not before it. Evangelism is a great raid cooldown because it allows you to get Atonement on the whole raid. Use it during your Atonement ramp up to ensure that the whole group will benefit from Atonement. In dungeon situations, I recommend taking Lenience, which is both passive and very strong. Make sure that you cast any on-use trinkets on cooldown. Something like Carafe used to be especially good for Disc Priests because it gave back mana and also did damage, but trinket damage unfortunately no longer works with Atonement. Now, once you've got the basic rotation down, you need to be aware of your cooldowns and when and how to use them. Rapture, Shadow Fiend, and Powered Barrier all provide burst healing or burst mitigation, and should be cycled through. On a fight like Portal Keeper, for instance, you might use Rapture for the first Collapsing World, then ramp up Atonements and use Schism for the second, then use Velens and Evangelism for the third, and on and on. The large number of burst cooldowns, especially with Velens, means that you can pretty much have something for every time high damage burst occurs. One thing I want to talk about is my UI setup. Lots of top raiders use ElvUI, Grid, Voodoo, or one of the other raid frame add-ons. I don't. I like using the basic frames, but I use a handy add-on called BigDebuffs, which I'll link to in the description, that makes certain debuffs larger on the raid frames. As you can see from the video, it's easy for me to notice who has Atonement because of the little buff icon on the bottom right for each person in my raid frames. I don't really think that UI stuff matters that much. It's more important that you have something that works for you, rather than that you copy me, or Mad Skills, or Jack, or anyone else. The WeakAura that you see just above my cast bar is made by a guy called Ablution. I'll post a link to the WeakAura in case you'd like to download it. I found it pretty helpful when I was starting out. I tweaked it just a bit so that it only loads in combat and penance bounces when it's off cooldown. I use Gnosis cast bar and have it set to show both casts and instant casts. It's a useful add-on to have as well. It helps me establish a rhythm, and it's useful for when I make videos so others can see what I'm casting. Overall, the most important thing to keep in mind when you're playing Disc Priest is to be aware of the damage patterns. For a fight like Garathi, knowing when Decimation is going to land is very important. You need to start getting Atonement out 10 to 15 seconds before the damage lands. Same with Collapsing World on Portal Keeper, or the Fusillade that the bosses cast in the High Command fight. You need to know when the damage is going to happen, so that you can ramp up with 4 or 5 powered shields, 1 or 2 casts of Radiance, and then Schism, if you've used that talent, and Penance as close as possible to when the damage actually occurs. The trick is being able to do all that stuff in advance, so that you're not doing all that and casting Penance late, or even worse, casting Penance without having Atonement out on people already. Anyway, I hope this video guide was helpful. Do let me know in the comments below if you have suggestions, questions, or anything you think that I missed in the video. Please consider liking the video and subscribing if you found it useful. It's a huge help for the channel. Oh, and I do have a Patreon in case you'd like to donate $1 a month to help me out with making these videos. Good luck, fellow Disc Priests. I'll see you soon.